with Code Veronica being almost confirmed at this point, I feel like Resident Evil might be just entering like a new era. So like, as we know, the RE engine is kind of like meant to reuse assets in new games and everything. Pretty much like every game usually tries to enter a new asset into the general like use cases. Like those little like bug head things in Resident Evil 3 turned out to be the like parasite heads from Resident Evil 4. The stalker mechanic began with Jack Baker back in Resident Evil 7, the first RE engine game. And, you know, things like Raccoon City being used in like a ton of Resident Evil games and probably will continue to be used in a ton more Resident Evil games. It's like basically just well known at this point that a lot of mechanics in Resident Evil are reused and a lot of assets are reused, which shortens the development process and kind of tightens things up, and also kind of allows you to make some inferences on stuff that's coming in the future. Like there are a few assets that are already kind of existing that kind of seem to hint towards Code Veronica, like a giant worm battle from the Separate Ways DLC in Resident Evil 4. That pretty much exactly mirrors the sandworm battle from Code Veronica, and just the sandworm that like chases you down before you fight it as Chris. And I just wanted to propose the idea that, being that we already kind of got a Leon arc with the remakes that we've already gotten and like a random Jill arc in there, despite the fact that that was kind of just supposed to be like a DLC for 2 in the first place, I think we might be entering a new era where we're kind of going back through Chris's games. And I think that that generally starts with Code Veronica. And I think that a lot of the things that happen in Code Veronica could add some new assets to the pool for, you know, like a Resident Evil 1 remake. Because as some of you may know, if you've played Code Veronica, there are certainly a lot of assets near the end of the game specifically that could really contribute to a Spencer Mansion in the RE engine. So that's a little bit of food for thought. You kind of enter a mansion that almost feels like a truncated version of the Spencer Mansion as it is. And trust me, like pretty much every asset in there could be used to recreate the Spencer Mansion in the RE engine. And then there's also like a very glaring mechanic of Resident Evil 9 that clearly seems to be preparation for an RE1 remake, which are, of course, the blister heads. The blister heads are like a one-to-one mechanical recreation of Crimson Heads from the Resident Evil 1 current remake back from 2002. And with all of this coming together, like all of these kind of seeming to support multiple versions of the Chris saga being through Code Veronica and Resident Evil 1, it just makes you think if they're going to try and kind of recreate a whole new era of Resident Evil that follows Chris's storyline and possibly Jill's storyline in the same vein that we got like Leon's storyline with the remakes that we got. And I think we will probably be getting 3 games in this arc too, because I think we're going to start with Code Veronica, obviously. All signs seem to point to that being the next new entry in the series. And I think after Code Veronica, we'll probably see Zero, which isn't really effectively Chris's saga, but it will add some new assets to the pot for, you know, Resident Evil 1, being that there's also more mansion assets added there, and even a co-op mechanic that might support a later remake of Resident Evil 5, which could be extremely interesting. I think that might be like the coup de grace that they're leading to. They could possibly be making Resident Evil 11 a Chris-centric story and kind of end the arc in the same way that they ended the Leon arc with Requiem. But I think there's more of a supporting factor of kind of ending Chris's arc at a Resident Evil 5 remake, because I think that there's a lot of benefit to ending the arc in a remake saga. And something that also makes me feel like that could be a suitable place for the story to be going is because Wesker kind of sets up an entrance to Resident Evil 5 in the Separate Ways DLC of the Resident Evil 4 remake. And I know that the setup is for an existing game that came out literally years ago, like more than 10 years ago, almost 20 years ago. But being that they're trying to remake the game, it does, in a way, feel a little bit like a setup with no payoff, because the eras are just so specifically different that Resident Evil 5 feels a little bit disjointed. So it would be good to kind of set up and pay off the Wesker story in Resident Evil 5 in the new engine, because I feel like there's a lot of fans that haven't actually introduced themselves to Resident Evil 5, and that introducing them in the new RE engine timeline could be a good way to kind of tie the series together. If RE0 was remade, it could also show the beginnings of some kind of truncated co-op that would kind of support a little bit of an RE5 remake. Obviously, I don't think RE0 would have co-op, but it could have something that, you know, leads to the beginnings of co-op mechanics, kind of like RE0, the original game had, where it kind of felt like a solo co-op, which sounds weird, but like it would make sense if you play the game. And yeah, I feel like all of this could just lead to an amalgamation of the Resident Evil franchise coming to a head in Resident Evil 5. As we all know, Resident Evil 5 is kind of a little bit of an ending to an era. It ends the Wesker era, which does seem to be coming back in the story now, but also bringing people, you know, new fans into the Resident Evil 5 kind of mythos could make people more aware of like really who Wesker is, along with, you know, Code Veronica, and then hopefully a Resident Evil 1 remake, which I'll probably talk about in another video later, because I think Resident Evil 1 Re-Remake kind of deserves a video on its own. But all of these things can kind of come together and kind of make this new canon, which has been established and pretty much confirmed in Resident Evil Requiem. Having Resident Evil 1 and Code Veronica and 5 all remade could kind of just solidify that canon and make the story feel just a little bit less disjointed. So I think that the new era that could just be perfect to bring in is kind of tying together Chris and Wesker's story, which will also bring us into the new era of games coming after Requiem. Just food for thought. I think it's interesting. I like the idea of it. I like the idea of, you know, adding new games and remakes and trying to tie together this new canon that's come from Resident Evil. And I think it's cool that a lot of the mechanics and assets seem to support these types of games coming out. I think it's interesting. I think it could be fun. But yeah, I know there's like a lot of negativity whenever it comes to remakes and everything, but there's also a lot of people buying the games. There's a reason that Capcom wants to make them. And ultimately, I think that it's cool that we have two kind of different timelines for Resident Evil. It gives a lot of people like me who like both timelines, you know, we kind of get multiple different timelines to engage with. More games, can't be unhappy with more games. And then it gives new fans more games to play and more ways to interact with the original series, and hopefully a lot more classic games will be added to the Steam and GOG store like Code Veronica, because I do like when, you know, people who really only like and engage with the originals get to play them and enjoy them without feeling like they have to engage with the new entries in the series, because I know that, you know, it's nice whenever everybody's happy, you know what I mean? But yeah, how do you guys feel about this new, the idea of kind of adding Chris's story into the ring in the same vein that Leon's story was remade and remastered and retold? Are you guys interested in that? Do you think it sounds fun? I know I do. I would love to replay these games in a different way. If you guys don't watch my Twitch, I am currently playing through all of the Resident Evil games. I'm currently on Code Veronica, although by the time this video comes out, I might actually be on to Resident Evil 4 Remake, but I'm currently playing through all of the games. If you want to go watch that over on Twitch, I would love to play the games in the remake format. I think that they're very cinematic and very cool, and I hope that this is something that we all get to play in the future. That's going to do it for me, honestly. I really appreciate you guys watching this video out of all the videos on YouTube, because I know there's at least 1,000 of them, and I think it's really cool that you guys watch this one. I really appreciate it, and if you're still here, click that subscribe button, because it'd be cool if you did. But that's going to do it for me, guys. Goodbye!